All right, guys, thanks for joining. I'm Troy Garrison. I'm the Vice President of On-Demand Services and Business Development for Cyxtera. And I've got TJ, and I'll let him introduce himself here in a second. That's going to be talking to you and introducing what we have. First off, we've been doing a lot with Nutanix now for about 1.5 to 2 years with this on-demand product, CXD. And you've probably started hearing more and more about it. The sales leadership has really bought in, especially as another way to sell Nutanix. And we'll get into the exact the mechanics at the end. But the bottom line we'll start out with is whether you guys sell the normal way you sell, or you help sell CXD, which is a OpEx version of what you're doing, a non-shared, this is all dedicated infrastructure. It looks the same to you guys and to the sales team, right? So if there's a 3 or 5 or 10 node on-demand monthly deal, it looks just the same to you guys compensation-wise as a 10 device or 10 license sale. So we've got that working sales plan really well, and we're excited about it. We've been going to most of the larger quarterly briefings and QBRs, and that with Chris and the leadership as well on down. We've gotten the permission to go all the way down, but I know that you guys, and we were at sales kickoff as well, you might have come over to the booth. I'm not sure where you guys, what knowledge you guys have of Cyxtera, but we're starting to get entrenched, and some of the leadership is, we want to make sure that you understand what CXD is, and that it's not a last option, but as an option with the customer, depending on how the customer wants to buy product, right, or license. Basically an alternative to keeping the customer, especially when introducing us into the mix. When you start understanding or hearing that the customer is a very cloud and OpEx type buyer, then there's been a lot of sales lost at Nutanix when that happens, and we're trying to be the solution for that. So I'll let TJ take over. We'll make this interactive, and we're going to introduce who we are exactly, then what CXD is. Please stop us anytime. This is a deep dive. You guys are engineers. You want more information. We don't want this to be a show up, throw up type presentation. So let's make this interactive. And thanks for joining this call. And so TJ, you want to take it?
Very good. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for taking the time out of your wonderful Thursday here. I appreciate it. Just as background, my name is TJ Rydell. I live in Chicagoland. I'm one of the Cyxtera sales engineers that handles essentially co-location data center services, and therefore everything that the CXD product and the rollout has encompassed within it. As Troy said, I'm a very technical guy myself, so please interrupt if you have questions versus waiting until the end. It's probably easier to field them in context, and we'll take them that way. Damon and Troy, guys, just to tell everybody here, they called me in to do this presentation essentially at the last minute, so Damon and Troy, if you'll keep me honest here, when I start to run out of time to do a CXD demo or whatever, and I'll fly however the wind blows here.
Yeah, it should be no problem. I mean, we've got 45 minutes left. It's a quick deep dive, and then followed by a demo.
Excellent. Okay. So for those of you who don't know Cyxtera, and I hope you do, because I think you guys have a very cool product, and I think Cyxtera has a very cool product as well. Our product essentially is data center services for co-location customers that are largely non-enterprise, meaning that we're, a typical customer is somewhere between, I would say the bell curve is about 20 kilowatts up to maybe 60 or 80 kilowatts, but we don't go after the huge juggernauts in the commercial space. So what we're after here is essentially, smaller companies, Fortune 500, U.S. government, military, that type of thing, but without that huge sweeping infrastructure where a customer would want to have their own data center to support their products. As you see here, we have, as of present count, right now in September of 2019, we have 57 data centers globally with about 2.6 million square feet of raised floor space, which is powered, and right now we're counting at about 195 megawatts of power. I don't want to read all the bullet points, but the further bullet points on the slide give you kind of an idea of who we are. And we're headquartered in Miami, although we also have an adjunct office in Dallas, Texas, Addison, Texas, technically speaking, and then those of us sales engineers are scattered across the globe, reaching literally across the globe into different countries, but the bulk of the deployment is here in the U.S. And here's a kind of a world map of where we have data centers at present. And as you can see, like anybody else in the technology space, we focus in the regional markets. That's where our biggest deployments are. And where possible, we try to construct data centers in like a campus environment. So if you see the big cluster around Washington, D.C., we have 6 data centers there that are all, less than a couple of miles apart. So they're connected together by dark fiber and lit fiber. So we treat these as one big environment. And if you ever deal directly with us, we name our data centers based on the airport code. So data centers, for example, in Chicagoland, home for me, are labeled ORD for the ORD O'Hare Airport with different numbers indicating where they are. So what we have done here is we came up with this premise. This happened essentially early last year, and we released it last summer, called CXD, whose acronym stands for Cyxtera Extensible Data Center. It rolls trippingly off the tongue, so we call it CXD for short. But the idea was based on market research here, which indicated to us that a typical new customer coming into a data center could take 3 to 6 months, and sometimes longer than that, from the time that they decided that they need a data center presence to the time they had equipment lit up and actually operating. And as you can see, there are various gates, all of which are linear. You can't do one until you've done the previous one. And that is what was forcing that timeline for us to get out to 6 months and sometimes 7 or 8 months. If we had telco problems, that's the long pole in the tent, is dealing with a telco circuit drop and the letters of agency and so forth that it requires to get a customer actually lit up and operating. So we developed the CXD concept, whose intent is essentially to cut that 6 months down to 1 day. And it can be done. In reality, contracting takes longer than 1 day, but from the time that a contract is booked and ready to deploy, we can get this out to 1 day. And one of the ways that we do this is by leveraging software-defined networking. And also, where it comes to Nutanix, we can provide compute resources because we're already standing these up in our data centers, and we're having them sitting there in a cage, powered up, connected to the network, and at the ready for a new customer coming in. So a customer could come to us and say, hey, I need expansion space, and I don't have time to buy the servers and rack them and stack them, or I don't have the power in my cage, or I don't have the space in my cage. Can I use yours? And we say, yes, certainly you can, and we'll provision them at that point with 3 or more Nutanix nodes and connect them into the compute infrastructure, and they can be up and running literally inside of 24 hours. So here, as you can see, the intent of CXD is to provide a point, click, and provision option to customers with the capacity that's already in place and it's scalable, and with the compute, as would come from you gentlemen over there at Nutanix, where we already have the platforms up and ready to go. The CXD platform combines these different layers, and I'll talk about what the individual products are, but as you can see, we have security at the top. We have a metering engine that tells to us how long is one of these nodes contracted with a customer. and how is it running. We can maintain power pipe and ping monitoring to the compute node, and essentially that's it. We provide the customer with the access to the node, and at that point we step out of the way and we're not looking at their data or their applications that run on the node or anything. That's largely up to the customer. So we're providing essentially an infrastructure as a service that goes up to the hypervisor, and then we get out of the way, and everything else the customer does is up to them. So obviously in our pre-sales process, we need to interrogate the prospect and say, are you familiar with running virtualized environments? And if they say no, then we say, Houston, we have a problem, let's back up there. But if they are, we can just take the next step and walk down the road to getting them deployed. And then the other elements here, I'll walk through these in turn. There's a specific slide to each one, but we have a software-defined network fabric that can provide WAN connectivity out to Al Gore's internet without worrying about the actual carrier drops or the LOA CFAs or any of that good stuff. And we also have our own data center infrastructure because most customers that I've come across in the past 5 to 7 years are hybrid in some way. There are things that they can virtualize and drop onto a blade server, but there are things that they cannot. Hate to say it, but mainframes still exist out there, and customers are loath to move off of them because of development costs, I guess, and they prefer just to keep them in their cage and run on top of them. But at the same time, their needs are growing, and very often they don't want to buy a whole stack of pizza boxes to bring in and slot and rack and power. So they're looking at virtualization more and more heavily as time goes by. So here's a
question on that.
Pardon me? Yes, go ahead.
Question on that. Do you have the AIX flavor of the Nutanix in your?
We do not at the current time, and very honestly, just from my own bubble as a sales engineer, I'm not seeing enough customers out there that we would consider productizing it, but ultimately I'd leave that up to product. I have not heard any compelling cases to steer me that way, so that's my opinion versus Cyxtera's, but I don't think so.
Yeah, it's not. This is Troy. It's not on the roadmap currently. Everything's customer driven, so if we start seeing a bigger demand, it's not hard to, you'll see.
Yeah, I would think if it came up, we could just take advantage of your colo offering instead for that or something.
You can. Yep, absolutely. And you'll see that the kind of heart of our offering is the connectivity part, the connection to software-defined network. So on the on-demand portion, we obviously stock a certain amount of different types of nodes, both the Supermicro and the HPE that we have ready to go. But we also, for a longer-term contract, will entertain custom nodes that would connect into the network. So would not preclude it if we had a big enough deal. And certainly colo all day long.
Good deal. Okay, guys, so as you see here, this is a nice spiderweb illustration of our platform, kind of from top to bottom. At the top, we have the different services available, which would include the software-defined WAN and connection partners and other services that walk down into our WAN edge. And at that point, we have a spine and leaf system within the data centers where this is all pre-wired up and already running, software API controllable, and also web accessible if you want to do it that way. And then down at the bottom, we have the different services that we're offering with the compute fabric, the co-location that I talked about for hybrids, and then security services for the customers that need it. There's kind of a short list of some of the different options that you see going down the side here, and a couple of things I'll point out is the IP transit. We have a blended internet service that we can offer, where, again, this is already set up and ready to go. It takes literally about 7.5 minutes to turn up when I'm demonstrating it to a customer. So within that time, they can actually get access to the internet, something that in the old world would take up to 90 days, and have all the cross coordination and so forth with the carrier and the data center to make sure the punch down was done properly and all the stuff that goes behind it. So this is already up and running. The Metro Connect uses dark fiber between sites. In the regional areas, we have tied all the data centers together, so that 6 cluster that I showed you back in Sterling, Virginia, they are all connected together. And we treat that environment at this point using the software-defined WAN as if it were a big single data center, and the actual location within the data center and the rack and the floor and so forth ends up being up to the customer. They go to wherever their cage is, but we treat the entity as if it were a single data center. And this is a little bit more on the software-defined network design. As you can see, we've got the full redundancy and resiliency built through it. We've seen this all our lives, and we're just extending the paradigm now into SDN. But again, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make a very robust service that we offer, world-class versus, a mom-and-pop shop with maybe a router at the top of the, the coat closet or something like that, and make sure that it's offered to all of our customers who get the same quality of service, the same level of service, no matter what we do. And this is actually, the software-defined network is not through all 57 data centers. Again, we're following the market, focusing on the regional nexus points of where the customers mostly are. But again, it's kind of a, if we get the customer demand to go into a certain space, and Atlanta is a great case there. We were running short on data center space in Atlanta, and also we rolled out the CXD platform last year, and we have customers, incumbent customers in Atlanta that were calling for it. So as we speak, we are now deploying the CXD platform into Atlanta, and again, following that market. So the CXD as a service here, we begin by calling CXD a platform, which has behind it and on top of it, if you will, additional services. So here's a case where we have a data center that's shown in the rectangle there with the customer cage, and we run an ecosystem connect. That's our product name. It's essentially a cross connect, but the intent is to offer to our customers that are in the data center, offer them in advance this ecosystem connect or a bundle of them. We sell them now in 6, 24, 48, and up from there with different numbers of these bundles that a customer can buy. And the premise is that they buy these and they have them deployed hopefully at the start of their tenure with us, but if they want to retrofit their cage, they buy the Ecosystem Connect bundle, and they have it in place that allows them to scale forward as they go until the bundle is used up, hopefully a number of years that they're with us using this bundle. And then we take the Ecosystem Connect at the Meet Me room, and we tie it in via what we call a CXD port into the CXD platform. Generally speaking, we want to run for any service, we want to run 2 connections on 2 Ecosystem Connect connections just to make sure there's resiliency, but we have done it in numerous cases where a customer will have a single connection point. It does open up a single mode of failure, a single point of failure scenario that we try to avoid, but if a customer is really cost conscious and wants to do it that way, we'll warn them of the impact, and then we'll go ahead and proceed to do it if they'd like to. The idea of the CXD is that the cross-connect is included in the price of the CXD port, so once they have this in place, they can buy any of the CXD services that they want and just use up their ports based on how many different services and what type of services they're deploying.
Question.
Yes.
Which cross-connect is included in that? The redundant one or the single one, or?
Well, the ecosystem bundle, like I said, would come as a bundle. And let's say they have a 6 bundle. If they want to do a single cross connect and only use one of those pairs, then we can do that. We prefer they use them in pairs, of 2 pairs for the connection to make sure that they have resilient backup.
Right. Okay. So that that's intended to be used with the redundant path then.
Exactly, right. So if they lose the
great.
deep or something like that, they still have a backup. So now we're looking at the CXD application, the architecture of it, and these are on this slide. We have 3 different data centers that are deployed currently with CXD, and as you can see, we can tie into different service providers. Azure and ServiceNow are shown in this case, but because we have tied all of the data centers together, we don't really care where a customer would deploy a service. They have that granularity and control as to where they want to stand up nodes and so forth. But ultimately, using layer 2, the customer can define their entire infrastructure, no matter where it lives, as one gigantic data center. And as you can see here in this slide, we have the operations control of everything, so we know, we're state aware. If a link is lost for some reason, we're aware of that, and we begin proactively resolving that. But again, the customer can choose where they want to deploy and what they want to deploy. And when I get into where the Nutanix compute nodes fit in, that opens up a whole world of possibilities for us, specifically for disaster recovery and things like that. Oh, I didn't know it built. Okay, sorry about that. So here's what it's not really what it looks like, but this is the concept of the CXD port. We call it a unified services port, and essentially when we terminate that port, we can then send that port off to different services, including our marketplace that we're developing right now. Security services, essential defense, the IP Connect that I mentioned, Metro Connect, which is from one data center to another within the region, and the CXD compute nodes run by Nutanix. So let's have a look at some of the services here. The first, I think, that would apply to you gentlemen would be the Nutanix-powered CXD compute nodes. Where and how we are marketing this is almost instant, expansion within a customer's environment. So, very common case study for us is a customer that launches either a new service or a new promotion with their customers, and all of a sudden they have the need for what would in the old world be several different servers running the applications, but they don't have the power in their cage, or they don't have the space in their cage to be able to rack and stack those servers and get them up and lit. So that has been a classic case for us where we can say, hey, instead of doing that, we happen to have a whole stack of Nutanix-powered nodes that are already racked and stacked in a controlled cage, and you're already connected to them by the CXD port. Why not just turn those up and use them? And as Troy mentioned at the start of the presentation here, the beauty there is that these customers are used to a CapEx type of, to an OpEx model, and so we can use these Nutanix nodes in an OpEx model that the customer is familiar with, and it's almost like a private cloud on demand for the customer.
I'm going to jump in really quick here, TJ. So guys, just to give you an example of where this, of an actual customer case in one. So Nutanix sales executive called me up about a year ago and said, hey, we have a customer Exelon here that I'm getting ready to go in QBR, and their CIO has basically put a mandate down. They've bought a lot of nodes from us in the past, but the CIO put a mandate down that said all further infrastructure must be in his eyes, DCAS, data center as a service. And the CIO didn't necessarily clarify what DCAS is, but Chip, your account executive, said, hey, Troy, could you come talk to the CIO during a QBR? I'll give you 30 minutes to come talk to him and see if we can continue Nutanix buying through you guys. So sat down with the CIO and some of the other leadership at Exelon, and they we're going to Azure. We want data center as a service. We don't really see buying more Nutanix nodes and outlaying that capital expenditure. So I talked about this product where it's a monthly OpEx charge for Nutanix nodes, non-shared, right? They're all dedicated down to the IPMI layer infrastructure, and ask him in front of his staff, I mean, does this classify as DCAS to you? And the CIO said, yeah, absolutely, this would be fine. And the IT staff loved that, right? Because they didn't want everything to go to Azure, because they knew, one, it wouldn't work. Everything, you know, they're a large energy provider, and they have a lot of nuclear stuff, and they didn't want to put it up on the cloud and things like that. So since then, we've worked with them through multiple variations, and they are buying CXD nodes now. And so the Nutanix CapEx, they've decided against it on any CapEx. They're starting to deploy these, and now they are looking at it in such scale that they want to have monthly capacity planning conversations with us to make sure that when they turn on, because as TJ will show you here in a few minutes, customers can turn this Nutanix on themselves, right? So they can add nodes to their cluster themselves. So these nodes, they happen to already be a customer in one of our data centers, and he didn't even know that, to be honest. But it was, and you can stretch layer 2 on that software-defined network over to from their environment in Colo to these compute nodes, and just keep building on their Prism nodes or the Prism clusters. So these, go ahead.
Do you support layer 3 if they're desiring that?
So right now we only stretch at layer 2, and we're not providing any layer 3 services. However, on the roadmap here very shortly, we are going to be offering layer 3 services of multiple types. So we're going to add a whole, it's kind of a new technology with a partner to enable layer 3 services and connectivity. So right now it's layer 2 or through the internet, or through, not necessarily the internet, but through a connection. But anyway, that's an example how, and then now Chip, your sales exec, continues to benefit from the sales of Nutanix to the customer. The customer has satisfied the CIO's DCAS or cloud first initiative, and it's another tool in their hybrid IT toolkit, right? So, and we also just, so Supermicro is what our predominant node is, but we've just added HPE, and they're also going to be utilizing HPE nodes as well.
Does the utilization of the HPE nodes change anything in terms of costs or support, or
so
take care of
it
that
doesn't
behind the
change
scenes?
anything of support or connectivity or anything. Cost is obviously different based on the nodes, but it doesn't add any additional costs. It's just based on hardware costs, right, from Supermicro to HPE. So, but we're offering different CPUs and storage sizes and things like that. So it just adds to, but it doesn't add any cost outside of what it would based on margin and things like that.
Soon after they're available, will you be using the the new G7 nodes?
Yeah, so we continue that. That's a big benefit to the customers, right? That we continue, and since this is a monthly OpEx charge, and our standard is a 12-month contract, but we'll work with them on different flavors of monthly contracts. But a big advantage to them is, okay, let's say they even do a year, they don't have to keep refreshing Nutanix nodes. After a year, let's say if they signed it, they want to upgrade everything to the latest and greatest Nutanix nodes that we're stocking in there, they can abandon what they had and put it on the new nodes. So it's a big advantage to them.
It's almost like a built-in upgrade based on the contract term.
HPE is also pushing a lot for tech refreshes, right? They're having a lot of tech refreshes happening that just like you guys are finding, people want to go to the cloud more and more and more. Obviously, the cloud first mentality. This gives another good way to do it, and HPE reps are pushing this as well.
Do you know how this compares, and if this is addressed later, to something like Zyleap?
Yeah, sure. So Zyleap is a DR as a service cloud, right? So you guys are doing the networking, all that kind of stuff to do it. We are just providing the raw infrastructure, right? So if a customer wants to use CXD and do their own DR in setting up how the networks they want and so forth, they can use us. If they want a more complete service, then Zyleap is a more complete DR service. So it's not really a replacement because we don't do any managed services other than break fix of the hardware and the software-defined network that it rides on. So, and just to be transparent, Zyleap is in our data centers, and the next waves of Zyleap going out will be taking advantage of our CXD platform. So you guys will build some of your Zyleap data centers on this network and nodes, and then adding your network components and so forth to it. So we have a tight relationship with you guys. So there are certain data center for Zyleap that you're in our colo data center with Zyleap, and in the future we'll be building other data centers for Zyleap on the CXD platform.
And sorry, Troy, I was looking for the DR slide, but it'll come up here in a slide or two.
I mean, there's nothing. It's not magic, right? This is infrastructure as a service, so you can utilize the Nutanix DR, and the benefit, Joel, that this has on DR for a customer, if they want to do it themselves and not go on Zyleap, is that they don't have to put a core network into a different data center, right? So the core network would be done by the SDN, and then they would take care of everything else.
Yeah, if only you had it in Canada right now.
So that's really funny. I had a long discussion with one of your partners, INSA, and our partners up in Canada, and I'm discussing it with product right now, putting it in Toronto. So as well as potentially in some of the Canadian government data centers. So few more minutes, TJ, and then you need to hit the demo.
Okay, good deal. So I've had this slide up for a couple of minutes here. Hopefully you can see all the bullet points. This is our IP Connect service, which essentially takes two or more Tier 1 carriers and blends the service together such that there's a built-in resiliency there, and more importantly, it simplifies the management and allows a customer to deploy connectivity pretty much at the drop of a hat. Like I say, it takes about 7 minutes to implement within the system here, so it's a good option for the customer, and all the customers, of course, are in a hurry. That comes with the fact of being a customer, but it opens up a whole new spectrum of capabilities to what they can get.
Yeah, so guys, on that, and we'll breeze through the other connect. So, you know, if you look at this and boil it down, so when you're looking at a customer, they need Nutanix nodes, either an OpEx or they need it up quick, right? Less than the 30 days, 45 days that it normally takes to go through the procurement process. And they need internet connectivity, maybe in a data center that they don't already have something in, or they want a separate availability. You know, contracting for internet, going through a different provider is going to take, you know, 2 weeks to a month by the time it goes through the carrier and get the paperwork and provisioned. With this, they can literally get the infrastructure and then under the same contract, light up their own internet service that is burstable within minutes and through the same contract. So they don't have to go through all of the carrier paperwork and that sort of thing. And it's blended IP, so it's multiple carriers with redundant capabilities.
As he said. Yep. The next option is the CXD Metro Connect. I've mentioned this before, but it's what we use to tie our regional data centers together. So we have a customer, this happens a lot in Chicagoland. We have a customer out at our Elk Grove Village data center, but downtown at 350 Cermak, it's a major connection point for a lot of financial institutions and so forth, and it's very much like playing Tetris down there in terms of finding space and power. We're getting near to being full at 350, and being, the type of building it's a classic building, so it's literally is running out of space. So if we have a customer that needs to connect to those financial markets and can afford to be in Elk Grove Village, which is about 20 miles out, give or take, they can ride the Metro Connect from Elk Grove Village down to 350 Cermak and then tie into whatever carrier they need to do there. So essentially what we're doing is we're expanding the reach of where our data centers in a regional area are and connecting them all together and leveraging the synergies of both of them.
And the bottom line on that one, guys, is you get to use our dark fiber and our optical equipment, and they don't have to put their own optical and run their own dark fiber. So I think we should probably move on to the demo. I think the connectivity and everything.
Yeah, I see what you mean. You bet. Let me get there.
So while he's doing this, I'll kind of talk about this. So guys, once again, a lot is not super rocket science in comparison to what you guys already do, right? It's another mode in what Chris Kaderis and the teams are now, certainly John in the commercial, I've been with the commercial teams now, multiple weeks here in the last several, is instead of waiting for deals to be almost lost, understand how the customer wants to buy Nutanix. And if they're talking about a flexible or an OpEx or taking their stuff to the cloud or whatever, make sure that CXD is an option so that we don't altogether lose a Nutanix sale. And how the motion is going through to let you guys know. So let's say it's a 5-node deal. We utilize you guys partner, whoever the partner of choice is for the customer, right? And if we're not buying the exact nodes that the customer is going to buy from that partner, but let's say it's a 5-node deal, and let's say, I don't know, Joel, who's one of your big partners that you use most of the time up there?
I don't know. You mean as far as resellers?
Yeah, resellers, because I mean all your stuff's obviously resold. So
Presidio.
Yeah. Okay. So Presidio, which
yeah.
Presidio, which is interesting because one of the companies that owns us is just buying Presidio. So we would buy 5 nodes from the partner of choice if your customer used Presidio. So we're not cutting the partner out or anything like that. And then we'd add it to our inventory, right? So the partner gets, and like Presidio, they actually get double dip because we have a partner program that they're in as well. So they get margin both on the sale and with us of the CXD. And then you guys would get node for node comp as well. Would
you be able to accommodate the smaller reseller partners that way for the dog and cats that are out there?
we do. Absolutely will. So if they want to sign up for our partner program, we can do that. Even if they're not signed up for the partner program, we'll still buy the nodes from them. Yep. We don't want to impede the channel. All right, TJ.
Okay, guys, can you see the screen here?
Yeah.
Dallas, select the location at the top.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, so guys, what we're looking at is the portal for the CXD. This is a demonstration portal that we sales engineers use. So as I go into it, it will be a little bit cluttered looking specifically because we have, I think, 18 quantity sales engineers using the same demo portal. And we don't always go in and clean up after ourselves, so just keep that in mind. But as you can see here, across this screen, these are the different locations we have active right now. I can say that yesterday, Atlanta, Georgia was not present. It's still not active here, or else it would be turned a lighter color. But as you can see, we're adding them as we go and as we're following the market to where the locations would be. So if I go into any one particular site, I'll drop into Chicago, being the hometown here. We will now have, through the visibility on the portal, a list of the different products and services which are available and which are deployed. So, for example, at the top here, looking at Chicago, these are different IP Connect scenarios that we have set up for potential, fictitious customers. But if I wanted to set up a new IP Connect, it's very simple. You go in and say new. I'll put in a company name, give it an arbitrary VLAN number. I'll select the network size. Let's say I need something decent here, and I can now select how fast I want it to go and whether I want it to be rate limited in any way. In this case, I'll select 100 meg and burstable. And what that means is that because I'm setting this IP Connect up on a gig line, it means I can burst technically up to the line speed if I ever want to. And we build that for the customer at the 95th percentile like the industry has used for the past quarter century. So it's literally that simple. If I were to click purchase here, it would take about 7 minutes to turn up, as I said, and at that point the customer would have full connectivity. Again, to refresh our memories here, remember that in the customer cage, they would have a CXD port, and so all they need to do is patch their router or switch or firewall from the router into the CXD port, and now they have the connection essentially up and ready to go. I'll back out of that so I don't leave a trail behind. Okay, and a given customer would have either a 1 gig or a 10 gig CXD port available to them, and they would activate whichever one it is that they want. So if I were to click on this, we've got this set up as a CXD port at 1 gig. Obviously, it's fiber. We can set the different port networking types, and as we talked about here, currently we do layer 2 with link aggregation, or coming up is layer 3, not yet ready, but it's on the roadmap very shortly coming up. And here, down below this, you can see we have a little checkbox switchboard with what we want this port to link to. So let's pretend I went back to an existing VLAN 25 that exists for a customer, could even be at a different data center, and I can make the association between this CXD port and VLAN 25. And this is how we tie the networks together and extend them out to where it is the customer wants to go. I'll get into that in just a sec and show an example of it. For right now, I'll cancel out this. And within the network now, let's see if I can find the VLAN 25. Right there. Okay, what I would have done is to take this particular network at VLAN 25 and tied it into the IP Connect and to the CXD port. And by building these linkages, this is how we're extending the layer 2 from point A to point B and making sure everything ties back together again. If I want to connect back here, I do the same thing in return. And I can't because it's a demo, but as you see here, we'd simply state what it is that we're connecting together, and we're building that block, that chain, based on the different blocks that we're setting up here with the switchboard. Now here's where the fun begins, is down here with the compute nodes. If I wanted, I can build a new cluster, and I could give it my fictitious company for Widgetdyne. I'll select the hypervisor. At this point in the demo, we're only offering the Nutanix AHV or ESX, but if a customer needs something else, of course, we can stand that up, and then that would be visible to the customer as they go to provision nodes.
Or let me add to that, they have full IPMI access. They can put their own gold image or whatever they want on it. We're just laying down the hypervisor as a courtesy if they want it, and we have multiple flavors of all that. But if they have their own version of whatever. Once it's deployed, they can go in through IPMI and put whatever they want on it.
So here I've configured what would be a cluster for a customer. Pretty straightforward. As you see, I've taken these nodes out of the standard Nutanix node pool. I've asked for 2.2 NTXs, 36-month term, and quantity of 3, which is the minimum. And of course, we can see here how many nodes would be available. So if I had a bigger project in mind and wanted this to be 6 nodes, I could do that. And at that point, I click to next. And as Troy just mentioned, I would be able to select here for my IPMI, do I want to use this network or do I want to use a different network? And if I uncheck this, then I end up with another field here where I'd enter in the different IP address space. And, these are all 10s, 192 addresses, okay, but I would fill in how I want the addresses allocated there. And I won't click next, but the next would bring me to a summary that would show up the different associations between the network. And at that point, if I click on deploy here, I'll uncheck it just to go a little faster. We'll use AHV management on VLAN 543. Typing on there we are. I'll select a small network for that. I don't have unique addresses here because I haven't mapped them out, but essentially what I'm doing here is I'm setting up what the different addresses will be, and here is where I get to my associations. And again, if you think back to the networks that we've already configured, I can select which different networks, where's that 125 I was looking for? Here, I'll use the 25 here. And if I click next now, I have the summary. And then once I click purchase, in this case, to set up a cluster will take roughly 7 minutes while the system, we use Snow ServiceNow as the architecture engine behind all this. So if I were to click purchase, then Snow will take we call it a programmatic process, but it will issue all the different commands to the nodes and build the cluster. And it takes about 17 minutes or so to spin up. And at that point, the customer will get an email with their login IP address. And as I mentioned before, we have a clock and a monitor on these. So we step out of the way and we let the customer at that point use the email with the login information to go into Prism and actually configure the nodes the way they want to and deploy their applications and what else they want to do. So again, we turn on the clock and the billing engine, and then we stand out of the way and let the customer take it over from there.
All right, TJ, we're hitting the clock here. So, guys, questions on the portal?
No, it's pretty cool. It's seems very streamlined, like Nutanix's own interface.
Yeah, and we're trying and we're adding. So another thing to note on here, you can utilize other Nutanix licensing, like Calm and your other add-on products, files, things like that. They are not provisional through the portal, but we will quote them with the partner and with yourself in that, and they do work on this. So you get the benefit of the other potential licensing uplifts as well.
One question.
Yep.
Do you offer this also as a managed service where you're managing the actual?
That was my next statement. Is we do not offer it managed. We do have partners that manage it, but this is a single tenant per node, non-managed, other than the software-defined network and the hardware. you know, we did a break fix, things like that. But as far as above that, hypervisor up, it is on the customer, but we do have or if you have a partner that, you know, or somebody you work with in that space, we're selling it actually, Joel, to a lot of managed service providers as their underlying infrastructure, right? But no, so like the TierPoint and QTS, people like that are offering a multi-tenant Nutanix kind of managed service. This is a unmanaged infrastructure as a service, non-multi-tenant offering.
Okay, and the collateral, do you have anything that would be specifically useful to the SE side and something that would be specifically useful for the sales side to kind of introduce the idea of maybe arranging a demo presentation WebEx like this?
Absolutely, and so I'll have Damon send that out to the list, as well as I'm going to be, myself and a couple other people, me or a couple other, are going to be on all of the sales team calls here coming up on the next few Mondays, so to introduce, but we will send out the collateral as well.
Okay, and do you do mine?
Not familiar with mine.
Mine is the Nutanix clusters that are kind of designed to be a backup appliance. You know, it even comes with the backup software.
That would be custom, so that is definitely not one of our standard stock nodes. But as I said, the software-defined network is really kind of the platform we can plug anything in. So if you have a potential, you know, customer that wants DR not on LeapZi or Xileap or something, and they want to use mine, bring it to us, and we can certainly probably accommodate it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Generally speaking, gentlemen, you know, bring it to us. Let's talk about it, because the more we see needs for such things and customer engagements for such things, the better the case we have to bring to the product and say, hey, does this make sense?
Yeah, we're very flexible as far as that goes, Joel. So, you know, the bottom line is we want to enable more Nutanix sales, and so the customers can buy it in a variety of ways. So we're here as a good partner to help with that, and the engagement process, once again, we're going to be on all the sales as well. We'll send out the collateral and all the contacts for you guys, Joel, and you already have a couple of contacts, but certainly Damon can get you anybody. But we'll send out for your appropriate region all the appropriate contacts, as well as the sales leadership. We're already talking about doing account mapping and things like that.
And I've got to say, from my standpoint, Nutanix SEs have been absolutely fantastic with support. I can talk about everything I just talked about with the portal and the slide deck and so forth, and then the customer turns their head around and said, let's see Prism. And you guys have just been great in stepping up and saying, okay, we'll set up another call and I'll walk you through Prism, and that pretty much helps us close the deal like you would not believe.
That's great to hear.
Example of a good engagement process, really quick to wrap it up in. So Kona, which is Coca-Cola of North America, the distributors, part of it, we have them as a customer. We start talking about CXD. They're not a Nutanix user to date, but they're a large infrastructure consumer, and they started getting interest in CXD. They really like the concept of everything, but we're not briefed on Nutanix. A couple days ago, the Nutanix SE stepped in. We arranged a call with Nutanix and with Kona and ourselves, did just a pure Nutanix briefing, not CXD, but a pure Nutanix briefing. They are now doing a POC less than a week later and are talking, Capgemini managing it for them and being a very large consumer of CXD and of Nutanix after all the briefings. So it worked really well all the way through. So just leave you
Good deal.
with how that one worked, and hope to be speaking with you guys again. And I'll send out, like I said, our email information, so if you have questions, but we'll be getting you engaged with your local counterparts from Cyxtera, and hope to be selling with you guys in the future.
Same here. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate your time.